I'm Dmae Roberts, executive producer of MediaRites.
And I'm Samson Syharath, managing artistic director of Theatre Diaspora.
We want to welcome everyone to the Oceania Celebration, a co-production of Theatre Diaspora and MediaRites.
On these two Saturdays, November 20th and November 27th, we're featuring the filmed production of Stories of Oceania, which will be available for viewing starting today, November 20th through December 4th, 2021, as a special 2-week virtual engagement.
Stories of Oceania is a 1-hour production produced by the Honolulu Theater for Youth. You can see the link to this event as well as a comment section to find out how you can view this beautiful production. It's so inspiring. It has beautiful personal stories of Pacific Islander and Native Hawaiian youth.
There are several virtual events featuring artists from Honolulu Theater for Youth, as well as artists locally who are presenting Tongan and Native Hawaiian culture and dance.
MediaRites and Theatre Diaspora are based in Portland, and we're going to honor the ancestors who lived on this land before us with a discussion with visual artist Greg Archuleta, who is Clackamas Chinook, Santiam Kalapuya and Shasta, and a member of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde.
Greg teaches about the culture and history of the tribes of Western Oregon, including ethnobotany, carving, cedar hat making, native art design, and basketry. And he's here with us today. Thank you so much for joining us today, Greg. Would you tell us more about your artwork?
Hi there. I teach classes we call Lifeways, and it's about the traditional arts of Western Oregon primarily we focus on. And so that includes the art form of the Columbia River region, and then our Willamette Valley tribes, so the Kalapuya, different various bands, and then our tribes that come from Southern Oregon, including the Shasta, Kalapuya, Rope River, and then the Umpqua in the southern part of the Willamette Valley. So we teach kind of the art forms, including carving, wood carving, basketry. We also do a lot of going out on the landscape and doing a gathering for different materials for traditional foods and as well as for the basketry materials.
Greg, where do you teach?
My classes are primarily, the tribe has an office up in Portland, so I teach there a lot. But we also go to Grand Ronde and sometimes to other sites to work with tribal members on the different activities.
It sounds really fascinating and important work. Greg, in the last couple of years, Portland nonprofits, especially in the performing arts, have done land acknowledgements, either in written or spoken form. And would you tell us the origin of land acknowledgements?
I believe it came out of the reconciliation efforts that started actually in Canada. And as part of their recommendations, I think they had a recommendation in regards to acknowledgement of the original peoples of that specific area and location. So I think it kind of grew out of that and then kind of spread to here in the US where now a lot of organizations want to have those recognitions of the people of the land areas.
How have you worked with organizations in crafting one that has meaning and honors Indigenous and Native American peoples?
Yeah, I think originally, people wanted like a statement developed and read, and sometimes invite us to read them, or they would read them themselves. And I think now there's been a bigger awareness that there's more than a statement that should occur, and that there needs to be more meaning and action behind the words of those acknowledgments. So we're kind of seeing that transformation. They've also become more widespread and broader in scope also. So those are kind of some of the things that we're looking at. And, when you do a land acknowledgement, what your focus is important. Like you mentioned, Portland. You want the acknowledgement to be on Portland. You want a broader region. You have an urban community these days that are part of the community. So how do you word these statements, and how do you do actions that connect to the ancestral lands, as well as the contemporary community um, that's part of the area and region.
Yeah, meanings and actions you were talking about. And I often wonder about how to make land acknowledgements authentic. And, often I hear or see in organizations land acknowledgement, and I think about that. What are your thoughts on authenticity?
I think one of the important things is that you work with the specific tribes of that area, and you really have to understand. Like just using Portland as example, where we have the ancestral lands here of the Chinookan people, including the Clackamas, the Willamette Tumwaters, the Hotlala, the Cascade peoples that lived in the Portland region here. Then you have the Tualatin and Kalapuya, and then so those are the tribes primarily in the Portland region, and these are the ancestral lands. These tribes negotiated treaties with the federal government and ceded these lands specifically. Um, and then you have, we had many visiting tribes from upriver and downriver, and today people kind of get everything kind of mixed up and who they want to recognize. And I think it's important to that the protocol is that you recognize those ancestral lands, specifically those people from those specific ancestral lands. And that kind of gets overlooked nowadays as people want to be politically correct and include every tribe and band in the region. But if they want to do that, that's fine. If they recognize that region that they're talking about is much bigger than just Portland. And then, as I
Greg,
mentioned, the native community, the urban community today.
Greg, I also wonder about, connecting stories of the peoples and connections to the land, in the acknowledgments. Like, how do you get the actual history and stories of peoples within the land acknowledgement?
Yeah, and I think again, just working with the specific tribes, and then they may refer you to like elders and things in the community that know some of those stories, or if they have information to share. It really ties to, I think, working with the tribes of the area.
If you were to work with MediaRites and Theatre Diaspora in writing a land acknowledgement, what would the process and form that would take?
I guess maybe some thought. We talked about the words and then the action. What are some of the actions that you can take as part of that acknowledgement? A lot of times people say, to the tribe, what should we do? But kind of thinking ahead of time of what some positive actions that you can take um, that create your statement and make it real and actionable. I think those are important um, kind of additional steps that you can take. And then working with the tribe, how does this sound? Does this sound like this would be something that would be beneficial to the tribal community? Yeah, and I think tying in to your specific area, the video and the media, the arts that you're involved with, is there a way to incorporate those into the things that you're doing or how you want to do the acknowledgement? I think those would be great. Um, and maybe looking at is there a tribal member from the community of that area that you could connect with, and maybe they could do some sharing that's tied to the arts, etc.
Because we're both located in Portland, where would we start in writing? You know, I guess you're our connection right now. And I'm
Mhm.
wondering if you could take us through the process of actually writing the land acknowledgement
Yeah,
right now.
yeah.
What would we do?
Well, for this area, I think it's important to recognize the ancestral lands that you're on. And as I mentioned, that if we go along the Columbia River, that we have the Footlaller Cascades, and their um, homeland area included the area below Bonneville Dam. There was actually a series of rapids there, the Cascade Rapids, known in English. So they had their fishing areas there, and then in the wintertime they would come down along the Columbia and be on where the Portland airport is, all along that stretch of the river there. So they'd be fishing at summertime upriver, and then they'd come down here to get out of the east winds, and they'd be on the south shore here on the Oregon, or sometimes on the islands like Government Island. And then you have the Clackamas Chinook that go from the Portland region south to Oregon City to the falls. And they were on the east side of the Willamette River. On the west side were the Willamette tumwaters, and they were at the falls down to the Portland area. And as you go to the west, then you have the Multnomas, Southeast Island in that area. And then as you go to the ridge line of the West Hills, Portland West Hills, then you go into Tualatin Kalapuya country. And so those are the primary tribes of this region, the Chinookan and the Kalapuya tribes and bands. And so for that's for the Portland area, primarily those tribes. So just a recognition of them, their ancestral lands here, their connection here, and then knowing that we had many tribes that were visiting. Trade was very common in this area, with the Wapato along the Columbia River, which is like a little tuber plant, is also known as the Indian potato. That was a big trade item for this region. Fish were a big trade item for like the Clackamas. And then from the Willamette Valley to Tualatin, Kalapuya, like had camas, things like that. So those were our trade items. Smelt was running along the lower Willamette and Sandy rivers and things like that. So with those things, we had a lot of trade with different tribes, both upriver and downriver. So keeping those things in mind also.
You've given us so much to think about, and every single peoples that you've included, also locations, and also what are the activities and the connections to the land, and also the foods of the area. If we were to write that, would that be a land acknowledgement right there? And also, you also mentioned going to tribal organizations. Where would we go here in the Portland area? I mean, because that's a wide expanse of places that you've just named.
Yeah. And I think it's important to work pretty much directly with the tribes. You have a lot of different organizations that they'll have different perspectives and stuff. And I think it's important, a recognition of the ancestral lands. A lot of times they often get overlooked. And that's really what those acknowledgements are about: the original people, original place, and those ties and how they're important and how they're recognized and honored today. But there's also the piece of, have a vibrant intertribal community today, and doing a recognition of that due to federal policies, state policies, etc., there was a lot of relocation of people. And that today a lot of them live in urban communities, and the urban community is very vibrant. The native population and activities and things like that. But so I think that a recognition that is appropriate. But primarily, I think is really working with the tribes of the ancestral area.
From what you described, I don't really see how you could read something of this magnitude in a couple of minutes, or within, like one paragraph even, because this is a wide expanse of history too.
Yes.
To acknowledge.
Yeah. So and that's really true. And if we look at this area, what happened was that we have these tribes here, and then through the treaties were made. We have the Willamette Valley Treaty, known as the Kalapuya etc. Treaty of 1855. And that treaty resulted in the removal of our tribes to the Grand Ronde Reservation, which is about 65 miles south of here. and the relocation of people. They actually took our people, and some of them they took to Oregon City, for instance, and they put them on a barge and shipped them up to Dayton, and then the people were marched from Dayton to the Grand Ronde Reservation, which is halfway between Salem and the Oregon coast. So there was the removal, but there was also important to remember that we still have connection to our ancestral places. The Moth by the Columbia River, the Willamette River, the places in this area are still important to us, and that we still have a connection to these places, and that we today always recognize and honor our ancestors and the places where we come from.
I guess I was a bit naive thinking that we could actually write a land acknowledgement in this session and have you read it, because it sounds like the land acknowledgement needs actually to be a whole process, and that takes time, and also maybe not something that can be done like before a theater performance, or unless you take the actual time to have an elder come and talk, or someone who can represent who's living, right, and talk about all of this history.
Yeah. And then we get a huge number of requests for things like this, and we have limited staff and stuff, but we do have people that have within the tribe that have additional resources too, where people can learn more about the tribe's history and culture. Today we're working with Senate Bill 13, I believe, which includes the development of curriculum by the tribes to be incorporated into schools and things like that. And so that's helping building awareness and things like that. And but I think if you can outreach to the tribes and get connected to them, I think that's really helpful and part of the importance of that recognition.
Well, it sounds like that we have to actually take a lot more time than what we normally hear in a land acknowledgement or see on a website. What type of you've indicated a couple of processes, connection, and I'm just wondering what else you would recommend.
The tribe has some different opportunities, like we've had in the past annual culture and history conference, and those are open to the public, and so we invite folks to attend those, and sometimes we'll do them by web and Zoom too, kinds of things, activities that kind of share about the tribe, its history, and its places of connection. So those are really helpful, so that you get a better understanding of the landscape and like our tribe's specific connection to place. So there's just examples. We have a website, so you can go to that website, and you can also learn more about the culture and history of the tribe. So those are just a couple of examples of resources for folks.
Do you have any other advice you would give to organizations and community groups regarding authentic acknowledgement of ancestors before us?
Yeah, and I think you kind of mentioned, we were talking about it takes some time to do these, and each kind of organization, they come from different perspectives, etc. And then that we get a huge amount of these requests, and so we do need some, hopefully, thinking about this ahead of time and not short notice, and that to have some patience, because we get an incredible number of these requests all the time.
How long do you spend with each organization in crafting it?
And it just varies by organization. It varies a lot, depending what they're looking at. Sometimes they're looking for like a more permanent statement. We have some organizations here in town that wanted a more permanent thing, and they actually put it on their entryway to their offices. They're doing a presentation an evening and want to somehow do the acknowledgement, and whether they want to read it themselves or if they want a tribal representative to do that if one is available. So they'll vary a lot.
When you say read it, how much time is allotted for that? You
And
know,
that,
once
yeah, and that varies by organization. Some of them are have very detailed agendas of what's happening that day and evening and things like that. So sometimes they have, okay, you have so much time, and other times they're fairly open. So it varies by whoever's wanted acknowledgement.
so doing a couple minutes before a performance, is that advised?
I think I think that's well, but again, I guess it goes to that what goes beyond that statement. What are some action things that can happen that can go beyond that statement. I think those are important, and I think that's really where um, those things become reality, and helpful. Is when you can go beyond just the reading of that statement.
So the actions being further research, further connections.
Learning more, having more awareness, learning more about the tribe and its history and its connection to the place. Are there different things that you can get involved with or connected to that are beneficial to the tribes? We're very much into enhancement of the fisheries, caring for the land, being respectful of their land. Just keeping those things in mind and doing some action things like that. Maybe you go help a group do some cleanup or something like that. And that's a way to honor our ancestors, where you're respecting and taking care of the landscape. So kinds of things like that. Lots of different kind of actions that you could take, big and small. Another one is that we do have a cultural center. So if you want to make a donation or contribution to our cultural center, and that's open to the public and shares a lot about our culture and history. That's another opportunity. You can visit Grand Ronde and learn more about our reservation there, and then now those connections that we have throughout Western Oregon.
Is there a suggested level, or is nothing like that?
No, it's really up to you, and we're just grateful for that support, that recognition.
I really feel like it having a living person is such a wonderful experience for everyone. And I'm also thinking of youth, to actually not, to be able to connect it to the real peoples that were here before us. And as you said, there were people before the people that we know of, right?
Yeah. And that's part of it, is that part of recognizing the ancestral lands and that connection. Then we have the history of removal, but maintaining that connection to place. But as part of that, that is important for today, but it's also for our future generations. We always want that knowledge of that, where you came from, and that's really important to us, because we're always thinking towards the future. We have places that have traditional foods on the landscape here, and some of them have been impacted adversely by pollution and contamination and things like that. But we're working to restore those areas, and it's not for us today, it's really for our future generations, so that they have something that they're able to maintain that connection to our ancestors. And so those are really what kind of drives us to what we do today.
Because what you said too, Greg, that it isn't also, about the past, but also looking to the future. And when we talk about future generations and young people are very, very concerned about climate change, because that's their future and the environment. And so connecting to the past can help us learn more about the future.
Yes, very much so. Honoring our ancestors. And they're kind of the guide for taking that journey into the future.
I really appreciate you guiding us today. I don't feel like we have a land acknowledgement per se, but I feel like we have the beginnings of one.
Thank you so much. We're honored to have you with us today.
We say Hayumasi, many thanks. Thank you.
Hayumas and many thanks.
Hayumasi, which is
Hayumasi.
many thanks.
Many thanks.
Mhm.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I hope that we can continue working. And I think out of this session today, I'm hoping that other organizations and educational institutions will also think about this as a process, as instead of the means to an end, like we need to do a land acknowledgement. So we'll talk to Greg for an hour and then it'll all be done. Maybe this is something we have to keep revisiting too.
Well, I was going to say yes, indeed. Hopefully we can continue a partnership and really look forward actually to the work that you do with your organization and seeing some of the films and things that you're producing. Really look forward to that.
Thank you so much, Greg. We're honored to have you talk with us today.
MediaRites and Theatre Diaspora presenting a beautiful 1-hour family play produced by Honolulu Theater for Youth, and you have the opportunity to see this work. Just go to the Eventbrite page on the Facebook page and visit MediaRites.org and TheaterDiaspora.org.
And join us for the rest of today, November 20th, and Saturday, November 27th, for panels, workshop readings, and videos from Portland's Pacific Islander and Native Hawaiian communities. Take a look at the schedule and links on this page.
Bye.
Bye.